Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. Over the last few days, miniseries Adolescence was released on Netflix, and obviously, that's got everyone talking. Where is it? Should we allow younger men, more specifically, to be able to prevent them from taking up this kind of ideologies and the safety that is required to make sure it doesn't actually cause any real danger to society? We're here on Piers Morgan, like three or four people to see what conversation we can actually have around this kind of topic, to see where it can actually lead to, and if there can be any solutions to the dangers or perceived danger, or if there is any danger at all to this kind of conversations. Anyways, I'm not going to waste any more time. I'm going to get straight into it. And if you like the video, please drop a like, subscribe if you want to see more, and let's get right into it.
Well, The Guardian summed up the general tone of the reporting with a headline that said, "From the police to the Prime Minister, how adolescence is making Britain face up to toxic masculinity." But is it really? Can it not just be a successful drama that references popular culture, as so many do? Critics of the show say it's another version of the same man-bashing narrative that gave rise to the so-called manosphere in the first place. Well, here to debate all this is the host of The Crucible, Andrew Wilson, the radio host, James Barr, the host of Tommy Laren is Fearless on Outkick, Tommy Laren, and the host of the Determined Society, Sean French. Well, welcome to all of you. Andrew Wilson, let me start with you, because look, I've got three sons, 31, 27, 24. I think I brought them up to respect women.
First of all, right, one of the main challenges you're going to face to be able to, like, I don't want to say get rid, but to be able to tackle this kind of issue is that you're kind of walking on eggshells when it comes to the ability to give people freedom to be able to have freedom of speech and actually to be able to do like whatever they want, right? It's very, very difficult to do that without at some level restricting people's freedom of speech. And if you believe in freedom of speech, it's very difficult to make argument and yet still to be able to try to silence all these people that are influences that are creating this kind of ideologies for the young people. That's one of the hardest part, because you could easily just silence them, ban them, boom, easily. But then people will be outraged by that. So that, hey, there's no free speech in this country anymore. Like, that's the difficult, that's probably the most challenging part. You have to almost influence it indirectly. You can't directly influence it. That's what makes it so difficult.
Women to not behave in a misogynist way, and to behave in a pretty decent way generally. But I'm also aware that they've grown up in an era when the likes of Andrew Tate and others have become increasingly dominant in the way that a lot of impressionable young men start to think and view women. And for all that Andrew Tate can say that is positive about getting fit and being successful and confident and so on, there's indisputably a hardcore streak of misogyny that runs through his veins, which I think has been quite damaging to young men. So I'm not all in either way here, but I can certainly see the arguments. Where do you sit?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that so I watched the show and it just goes through a typical feminine view, right? So all of these things are always through the prism of the feminine. So young boys, they don't do well in school. They don't do well in school because it's all programmed for the feminine. Stay still, fold your hands, right? Be quiet. Boys are rambunctious. They like to beat each other up. They like to be mischievous. They like to break things. They like to do that kind of stuff. There's no outlet for them to do that stuff. Their teachers are all women, right? There's basically all masculinity is now considered toxic, basically all of it. The same women who are getting their double shot of espresso on the way over to the school they're about to teach at, they're 24 years old. Sometimes they're banging their own students, right? Hilariously enough. And then these people go out to Parliament. The same women will go to Parliament. They vote to send men off to war to stab each other in the face with bayonets. And you're concerned about toxic masculinity. It cracks me up. It's like the brutal savagery of men is a necessary precondition for society to exist. And we just kind of pretend like it's not. And this show should actually be an indictment on the feminine rather than the masculine.
You said a lot there, right? But first of all, number one, like, we're not in like the 15 or 1600s anymore. We've moved past that. What he said earlier when he said a prerequisite of a functioning society is the brutal nature of men, this would have been true back 100, 200 years ago. But now we have laws in place. People respect laws now. we have like protocols in place, we have like mechanisms in place to make sure you don't need brute force every single time. That should be literally the main goal. You don't have to use force to make people get in line. That's not good. If you're having to use force to get people in line, you're probably not doing the thing right in the first place. So either what you're giving to them probably isn't beneficial to them, or number two, you're going about it in the wrong way. If people are resisting constantly to it, you probably have to try and do something to make sure, like to try and rearrange how you will like make it to them, or how you would like, or what it is, like whatever message it is you're sending to them. Maybe you need to like try and fix it or make it better in some way, shape, or form. Because if people are just resisting every single time, it makes no sense. You have to do something about it. That's number one. Number two, he says like kids boys are rambunctious, they like to break things, blah blah blah, all this stuff. Then the school system is made up for women. No, it's just that women respond more appropriately towards a school setting. That's just what it is. It isn't that the school setting is disadvantageous towards boys. It's just women are just better in that certain environment. That's what it is. I think it's putting too much emphasis on like what the way things used to be back in the past, that is not actually saying, hey, what we want is for people to not do this, right? Like it should be easier to be able to be accepted in society, but him, it just puts too much emphasis on the way things used to be.
Because basically masculinity is just punished everywhere all the time, nonstop. It's no wonder guys like
I do partially agree with that. Like people like they vilify masculinity way too much. Like it's getting quite ridiculous now. Like that term toxic masculinity. Like I've never heard the word so used so much in my freaking life. Like it is like a bit annoying, but like I still think it's really wrong.
How do we protect young men from the easy access at the moment there is to people like Tate? I mean, how do you actually put a ring fence around them so that you can tackle exactly what you've just said?
First of all, you need to understand to be able to like get a solution to this kind of problem, right? When people, a bunch of people sway from one side to one side, one of the most important factors to be able to recognize that, hey, if we want to bring them back, we have to, you can't just forcefully tell them, hey, what you're doing is wrong, blah, 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 blah. You have to find the reason why, regardless, even if you think it's wrong, you have to find the reason why they went there in the first place. It's because these people, the Manusfet, Andrew Tate and all this, they provided a safe haven after being vilified from one side. That's why. They provided a safe space where men feel like, oh, look, I'm not getting like, I'm not getting vilified for being a man. Oh, toxic masculinity, like all these words like misogyny, blah blah blah, all this like all these terms, right? All these buzzwords, right? They're not getting used in this like safe space that they feel like they're actually at. You have to create somewhere that they actually feel like, hey, like we're not just getting like shafted every single time we give an opinion, every single time we do something. When you get that and you understand that's the reason why they went in the first place, then you can find a solution. Any solution that you want to like get in the first place, you need to recognize that the reason why they went there was because they felt vilified by one side, and they felt safe. So if you're gonna bring the guys back, you have to be able to, number one, give them the reason why like they would want to come back in the first place, and then provide, hey, this part of the spectrum is actually safe for you to be in. That's one of the like most important factors for you if you want to do that.
But they're not also being dragged into that world.
It's tough because they're growing up in a world we never grew up in, Piers. We didn't grow up with the internet. We didn't grow up with Bumble,
that's right.
Tinder, Instagram, Facebook.
No, I was taught how to treat women by my mother, my grandmother.
Open the door,
my
right?
Aunts,
Open the door.
A lot of strong women in my family, very strong women, and they would just take no crap from the men. So that's the environment I grew up in.
Absolutely. So how do we insulate our children from this? By having conversations, putting parameters around the social media aspects of life, and having the conversations at home. Hey, son, hey, daughter, this is what you're going to see out there in the real world. This is what you're going to see on the internet. If you see something like this, that is not how a true man.
It's not going to work. It will never work. This suggestion that is given, it will never work. You can't just tell someone that believes a certain idea, that they've believed it fully, and then tell them, hey, what you're doing is wrong, so you need to change. The reason why they went there in the first place, you need to provide the reason to bring them back. You need to make sure whatever like idea you're putting in their head, the new one, they need to feel safe, that it's actually safe for me to want to be there. This idea of, oh, you just talk to them and blah 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 blah, it's not gonna change anything. You could get 1 or 2 people, but overwhelming majority of it, it's never gonna be. Because guess what? The moment they feel uncomfortable after they've switched side, Andrew Tate is always gonna be there. He's always gonna provide a safe space for them again. Like, it's so simple. Like, I don't know why they don't get it. You can't just tell them to stop being bad. You need to create a safe space. And like what I said earlier, redefine what masculinity is. Give it in a positive light rather than just bashing every single time. Every single time right now, when masculinity is being talked about in the media, it always seems to be vilified. That needs to stop.
Is supposed to act. And hey, that's not how a real man's supposed to treat you.
Right. So
We have to have the conversations.
Yeah, Andrew, do you intrinsically disagree with what you've just heard?
Yeah, I do. I think, again, all of this is always the burden on men. Burden on men. Burden on men. Men need to be doing this.
No, it's a family, Andrew. The family.
Hang on. Let me finish,
family,
man.
Andrew.
Men need to
Husband and wife.
Okay, yeah. So let me back up. Okay, again, men need to do this. Men need to do that. What I'm talking about is, what duties do women have in society? What are the actual women's duties towards men? Everybody is raised from the time they're kids. How we're
I
supposed.
feel like this is a fair question. This is the fair question because you're saying, hey, men need to be protectors, men need to be providers, men need to do this, and that. Okay, like, surely if one side is just getting it on every single time, but the other side isn't really doing anything to help, you just kind of feel like, hey, well, it's obsolete. Like, what's the whole point of me doing this? It's like, all right, screw this. I'll just go back to where I used to be, because clearly this isn't serving me any benefits. Like, it clearly isn't serving me any benefits. But the thing is, right, the argument that I would make that they're not making is that, hey, this isn't about relationship or anything like that. This is just about being a good citizen, like being civilized, right? We're not teaching you how to be a husband, how to be. This is where they got the conversation totally wrong. This isn't about how to be a good husband, how to be a good boyfriend, where like it requires some form of like commitment from one person to another, and then blah, blah, blah from there. This isn't that discussion. This discussion should be, how do you get men more civilized? But he's talking from a perspective of relationship. She also is. He can't figure out, like, no, like, this is that isn't the conversation. The conversation is to be how do men get to be more civilized? But it's making it all about relationship between men and women. But they're not saying that. I don't get it.
Got a panel of young men on and asked them, when was the last time you cried? Let's watch this.
When was the last time you cried?
Honestly, the last time I cried, I couldn't tell you.
Same with Leo, I can't really remember the last time that I cried fully.
A lot of times I feel emotion and I look at myself, why can't I cry? We're told to suppress our emotions.
I feel like to guys, we may be treated a certain way that evokes an idea that we have to be extremely strong and upfront and here as a man, and I'm going to be composed at all times.
Now, I've got a slight issue with this, Tommy.
See, this is what I have a problem with, like, with people on the left and generally people that are trying to fight this toxic masculinity and all this stuff, right? What does crying really have to do with anything? I don't know why that even is a question. Like, when was the last time you cried? What, like, a better question was, when was the last time you thought about going to therapy? That would be a way better question than when was the last time you cried. I just feel like the left generally have just focused on like the most minute and irrelevant stuff. That right there, when was the last time you cried? That's one of the like the most retarded questions I've ever heard. There's just no point. Like, just because you don't cry, does that mean like what does that actually mean? And also, women have more tendencies to cry than men. A guy not crying, number one, doesn't mean he's not in tune with his emotions. Number two, it's probably better for a guy to cry less than a woman, because at the end of the day, it's kind of natural for a woman to expect the guy to be the bedrock of the relationship. So if the woman is crying, you would expect the guy to be able to be the one to comfort her. And that kind of like dynamic, you would expect it to be normal. So I don't understand this idea that, oh my god, like, not crying, therefore it kind of reveals everything about you. It just doesn't. A better question would be, when was the last time you thought about going to therapy? Like, when was the last time you thought this kind of thing would actually be beneficial to you?
Andrew Wilson, when was the last time you cried?
When I had a death in my family.
And how long ago was that, if you don't mind me asking?
Many, many, many years. Yeah, many years. I don't know, maybe a decade, something like that.
Right. So you haven't shed a tear in a decade.
I don't think so. No.
Would you see it inherently as a weakness in a man to over-emote?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Men, listen. You don't want men to fall to pieces in crisis. You're the head of a family. You're the head of your household, and also you're the heads of nations. You have a moral obligation not to fall to pieces. In fact, I would say you're duty bound not to. You need to be able to control your emotions, and you need to be able to attempt to control them at all times. It's not to say that you're not going to lose control. No.
But then that's the problem, though. There's a fine line between controlling your emotions and just suppressing it and it just building up and then you lose control. That's typically what the fine line is. Controlling is very good. Controlling your emotion is very good. And to control your emotion, it requires a level of suppressing your emotions. But then it just gets to a point of like you're suppressing every single time. And then one day it just lashes out. That's typically the fine line where it starts to get dangerous.
Nobody's perfect. But I think that the idea of the stoic man is a much better prospect for the idea of like this leftist that I'm arguing with next to me on the panel. I would not want to be that guy, that person who just cannot control their internal emotions. They can't do it. And unfortunately, again, this is through the viewpoint of the feminine prism that it's only through empathy, right? Empathy first. And it's like, no, it's not always about empathy. It's also about reason. It's also about logic. It's also about understanding that we live in a carnal world full of warring tribes who are always killing each other. And that's part of the human condition. You can't afford to have your men losing control to emotion or to empathy.
James, when was the last time you didn't cry?
Let's
flip the question around.
I haven't cried today, but I did cry yesterday, and I think it's okay to cry. And it's funny that you keep trying to goad me and saying that I don't have control of my emotions. I think I have incredible control over my emotions because I know what's upsetting me and when, and I'm able to talk about it.
Well, how often do you cry?
I mean, not all the time, but
every day?
No, not every day, Piers. I cried
Two
yesterday.
or three times
I probably
a week?
haven't cried for about 3 weeks before that. But honestly, my therapist tells me I need to cry, and it's a good relief.
But the point being, Andrew hasn't cried in 10 years.
I think that
Obviously, like crying sometimes just release the emotion, but it's typically about just finding the balance. Like, where is it that like there is a stop, and where is it that like you can actually like let it go? That's typically the fine line. Like that's where the difficult one. That's why it's good to like probably go to a therapist to see like a professional person where they can actually give us, hey, listen, these situations, it's normal because if you hold in this situation, you're more likely to like experience this situation again. Therefore, you holding it eventually is gonna burst and you can do something that you don't like. But anyways, I'm gonna wrap it there. If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe. And if you have any disagreements or any other opinions, put it in the comments down below. It will be much appreciated.